Well, welcome. I'm Pete Kramer with Pete Kramer Media, and this is Lights Up, the high school theater podcast. I'm so happy to be joined today by Allison Parsley. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Allison is the dance teacher and PACE department chair at Mamaroneck High School. PACE is the Performing Arts Curriculum Experience. Tell us about PACE, Allison, and what that means.
Yeah, so PACE is an elective class that our students can choose to take here at the high school. It meets during the regular school day as a period within the day. And our students who choose to take our class, who are freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, they take all three of our art forms simultaneously. So dance, music, and theater. So they'll rotate through like 6 classes in dance, and then they'll go and do 6 classes in music, 6 classes in theater, and then they'll come back to dance. And what we do is every single time the students rotate from one art form to another, we mix them up so that they are constantly getting to, the ability to work with new people on different projects that we're doing. And then as a senior in our program, the students can choose to what we call major in 1 or 2 of the art forms, depending on what their interests are and what room they have in their schedule. So the students can take just dance as a senior, or just music, or just theater, and then they're working on much more complex projects. And then in addition to our coursework, we have 3 main stage productions every year. We have a fall play, which is directed by our theater teacher. We have a music performance called Soundscapes, which is actually student directed. The students sort of come up with all the ideas for the pieces, and that is done usually by PACE juniors and seniors in our program. And they come up with all the ideas, they help cast their piece, they run all the rehearsals, and then our music teacher sort of helps them put everything together on stage. And then we have our kinesthesia performance, which is our student choreographed dance concert. And that, again, is PACE juniors and seniors. They develop an idea. They work closely with me as the dance teacher to sort of, think about casting ideas, costumes, lighting, and they, it's all original choreography that they teach to all PACE students, freshmen through seniors. So, they get that experience of leading their peers, which is, sometimes a challenge for them, but a really big learning experience. And so that is sort of PACE in a nutshell.
It's really, I describe it, and there was only a couple of schools in the area that have similar. New Rochelle has a similar program. There are IB theater programs. This really, to me, feels like a conservatory within a high school setting. It's like you're doing all that extra work. It's curricular, but there's also extracurricular components like the high school musical, which we'll talk about. But that they must come out of there just kind of they must roll out because they're so well-rounded, having gotten so much experience in all those disciplines. One of the things I really want to talk to you today about, Allison, is turning the page. We are in June. We are ready to turn the page on this school year, to move on from graduating seniors to the incoming freshmen who are going to step into those shoes. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about, and this is kind of segueing off of PACE. I talked to Elise Mullen, who a name you might recognize.
Just a little bit.
And Elise is your music director for the musicals. She's currently on maternity leave, but I caught her on maternity leave, which was very lucky. She said, you are the most organized person she's ever met. You answer emails immediately because if you don't, you won't do it. That's what she said. And she said, you transform students into star performers. She said, some kids come in not knowing their left foot from their right, and you give them the confidence to go on stage. She pointed out Singing in the Rain from 2020. She said, you took 2 non-tappers. One was a star athlete as Don Lockwood, and the other was a seasoned actor with vocal chops and some dance who played Cosmo Brown. And she said, you transformed them both into tapping machines who stunned everybody. Talk about what it takes to take 2 boys, non-dancing boys, and turn them into Lockwood and Brown.
Yeah, I think, I think at the very start of it all is you have to lead these kids with excitement, and you have to show them sort of the wonder of what they're doing. And as a director, as a choreographer, you have to be 150% invested in the show that you're doing in order to pull something like that off. And I think also, with kids like that, just with our shows in general, the kids know that we as a creative team have high expectations, not high expectations as far as, talent, as, we don't really go there, but high expectations as far as what our expectation is of you as a performer in the show, in rehearsal, and what you do outside of rehearsal and between rehearsals. And so we set that expectation up from the very start of our show that, if you want to be involved in this, like, you are committing to this, and you need to be a committed member of this group, because we are only as strong as our weakest member. And, and if you don't want to be that weakest member, right? And so it's us as a creative team holding our students accountable, but then our students also hold each other accountable, because they know that, just as a program, we strive for such excellence, and we just have such high expectations for everyone involved. And again, it's not a talent thing, right? We don't cut anyone who comes out for our shows. We want everybody who wants to be a part of it a part of our shows, and we find a place for everybody who auditions for our shows. And that's also really important to us, is the idea of creating community and inclusivity. And I think that just sort of as a base level really helps raise the bar for everybody coming into our shows. And, we do, speaking of seniors leaving and freshmen coming in, we do really rely on our upperclassmen to sort of take the underclassmen under their wing. And, we've gone so far as to do things like a buddy system, right? So, here comes a shy freshman, right? Pair them with a junior who might be a little outgoing, have them bring them into their circle so that they're a part of it. And, things like that, theater in general builds community, but really placing an emphasis on that. When we start to come together as a full cast, we're doing tons of community building activities, whether it's, some Olympic style relay races, we're putting kids on teams, or we're doing, musical theater trivia, whatever it might be, just ways to build community. Because I think, when you know everyone in your cast and you feel comfortable with everyone in your cast, you can go to that next level as a performer. But speaking back to the two students who were Don and Cosmo, I actually did really luck out with those two that year, because they were also best friends. And and I worked with them, because of the nature of their role in the show. I worked with them a lot, just the two of them, and they would come into rehearsal and they would say to me, "Oh, Mrs. Parsley, we, went over to each other's house last night and we were practicing the triple time step in this section of, whatever song it was." So I really did luck out with those two kids, because they were really best friends and they did push each other. But I think that's the other thing too, is that, we really do want all of our students in our cast, especially the upperclassmen, to constantly push everyone along to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And that's really important to us.
You're modeling behavior that you want to see. And the PACE kids must help drive that a little bit. I mean, I would imagine, I'm there a couple of times a year, but I would imagine that the PACE kids kind of drive a lot of that conversation, in terms of these kids have made that extra commitment to do this. But I don't know that I don't imagine that Lockwood and Brown were PACE kids. Or were they? One might have been.
Yeah. I would say, every year that that I've been involved in the musical, at least 95% of the cast is PACE kids.
Wow.
And, we always have, some kids who trickle in here and there. But yeah, so, a lot of them have already built that community within PACE that then transfers over to the musical. And then the challenge then becomes those, couple students here and there every year who are not PACE students. How do we sort of bring them into the fold and make them feel like they're a part of the community as well? So, yeah.
The idea of that that continuum, the conveyor belt. It's always going. You're always changing over. You you are probably the first musical of the year. You come in really early. You got in Singing in the Rain before the pandemic hit,
We
weeks
did.
before the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
There are shows that are later in the year that don't do that. But what that also means is that you've got to choose your musical early. You've got to cast it early.
Yes.
You have a sense, because you also choreograph at Homix, the middle school. So you have a kind of a sense of who's coming up and what. You must be like, some years you must be licking your lips like, oh my God, I can't wait to get the kid in high school.
Yes, of course. And yeah, and the choreographing at the Homix is a new thing for me. I'm going on my 3rd year of doing it. But it has been a really wonderful experience because, just speaking as a choreographer, as a dancer, there isn't really a dance program in any other level in the Mamaroneck School District. That's sort of the level of pace. And so to be able to go into the middle school as a dance teacher, and for a lot of the kids who are doing the musical there, to show them that dance is not scary, right? A lot of kids, especially around that age, unfortunately, boys really sort of think, well, I'm not going to dance. I can't dance, whatever it might be. But to show them that, no, you can dance. And my philosophy is always every single one of us is a dancer, right? We might have different styles. We might be able to do it differently. We might have different strengths, different weaknesses, but we can all dance. If you can walk, you can dance. So, it's sort of taking, trying to shift that mentality earlier, before they get to high school, so that they, as a middle school student, they're like, oh yeah, I am a dancer and I can dance and I can do this. And so when they get to the high school, and it becomes much more complex, or I am going to be, throwing tap at them, which they've never learned before, they
Sure.
have the confidence already that they think, I can do this because I've done it before. And so, now it's just something a little bit different, a little bit of a different genre, but I can do it. So that's really important.
That's great. You have an MFA in dance from The Ohio State University.
Yes.
You have an MA in dance and dance education from NYU, and a
Mhm.
BA from Franklin and Marshall. You've had a lot of dance teachers throughout the years, going back to probably little Allison when she was
Yes.
knee high,
Mhm.
learning those first steps. Is there a voice in your head when you're teaching that middle schooler at Homix? Is there somebody who you hear saying, try it this way?
So I had a really wonderful, ballet teacher when I was at The Ohio State University. And it was the first day of class, and we had all just finished the bar, and she said, all right, everyone come out into the center. And, we were all plastered up against the bar. No one wanted to come out into the center because it was our first day of class. And she just said to us, never deny center stage, never deny your moment. And, so I really thought about that, ever since. And I think my biggest thing as a dancer, as a choreographer, and as a director is I want every kid to have their moment. Every kid deserves that moment, whether it's, being, in the front for a dance that maybe, they're not themselves super comfortable with, but like, I want to push them to do that, or whether it's, getting them to, act as a certain character, whatever it is. I think I just always have that in the back of my mind, and just, every kid deserves their moment. Even if they think they don't want it, because once they experience it, they think, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Yeah, I want more of that. Right.
Right.
So it's, yeah, so that, that has always stuck with me, as I've moved on in my teaching.
That's great. And to think that those were MFA students who were still
Right.
hugging the bar. That's pretty telling. That, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's those first day jitters, but I just wanted to remind folks that you're listening to the Lights Up, the high school theater podcast. I'm Pete Kramer with Pete Kramer Media, and we're joined today by Allison Parsley, a dance teacher at Mamaroneck High School. So Allison, let's talk a little bit about the styles of dance. I remember when I visited you back, geez, it was in January, I think it was. January, maybe? Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Always the first one of the year, always one of my favorite stops because it's first of the marathon of like 65.
Yep.
I know what's coming. But we talked a little bit about this year you did Anything Goes. Last year you did Grease.
Mm-hmm.
Those shows could not be more different choreographically,
Yeah.
sonically, in where they are in the canon. All of those things are so different. And I remember you saying that that's really important to you, that you give
Mm-hmm.
your students that kind of breadth of experience in terms of style. You so what can a kid learn? What can Bob Fosse teach us as opposed to Jerome Robbins?
Yeah, I think it's for me, I have always sort of had a history background, and I've loved studying the history of dance. And I think I always tell my students, because in the PACE 2 year, we study modern dance choreographers quite heavily. So we're learning Alvin Ailey, Jose Limon, we're doing Paul Taylor, and so it's Merce Cunningham, right? We're learning all of these really incredible historical figures. We're learning about their philosophies of dance. We're learning about why and what was happening in the world when they were creating the pieces they were creating. What were the ideas, the main ideas behind, the musicals that they were creating this movement for. Not only that, but also the actors and actresses that they were creating this for, right? You can have a whole conversation about Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, and that opens up a whole can of worms.
Sure.
So, it's really important for me that my students understand the history of dance and the history of modern dance, musical theater dance, all of it combined, because one of the things that I really like to push my students to do is to, step outside the box, create their own style, not just copy what everybody else is doing because they think that that's what they should be doing, but to really take the time to think, what do I as a choreographer want to be doing? What do I want to say with my choreography? What is important to me as an artist to be able to express and to say? And for me, that's, looking at our past and learning about our past and learning about the history of dance so that we can move forward and evolve. So, it's important for me that they learn Bob Fosse, but, they also learn about, some of the more, Christopher Gattelli, right? So that they learn about all of this, and they can sort of see the continuum so that they, hopefully, my hope is that I push them to be the next innovator in musical theater choreography or modern dance choreography. That's really sort of what my goal is I tell them all, I think my students will tell you that I often say, if you all look the same, I've failed in my job, because I want you all to look different. Like, as far as them creating their own choreography and coming up with their own ideas for things. I don't want cookie cutter choreographers. When we get to kinesthesia, I don't want every piece to look the same. I want it all to be different. And that's when I know that I've succeeded at my job, when my students are able to do that and, and create their own work that is uniquely them.
That's remarkable. I love that. I love that answer, because unless you're in a chorus line at the end, and this is a total minority report. This is going to get me canceled probably, but I'm always struck when I watch a chorus line is the stories are so great, and the dance number at the end is so meh. It's like, okay, now you're all fitting in. Isn't that great?
Right.
There's none of that at kinesthesia. It's about popping the head, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that goes back also to why I choose, or why I strive to choose, a musical every year with a very different style, is because I want my students to be able to experience, the full range of what's out there. If we were just always doing golden age musicals, they would never get to experience something that's a little bit more modern. And if we were just always doing modern, I can't tell you, and I'm sure most other high school directors of musicals feel the exact same way. I could count, if I had $1 for every single time my kids ask, can we do Mean Girls? Can we do Heathers? Can we do, and not that there's anything wrong with those shows.
Right.
It's where their interest is, and it's something that they're interested in. But, as a director, you sometimes need to push them in a different direction. And, and I can tell you that, when we announced a couple of years ago that we were doing Footloose, the vibe was from the kids was like, ugh, Footloose? What? Really? And then at opening night, they were like, Mrs. Parsley, I'm so sorry that I ever doubted Footloose.
Yeah.
And, because they just had such a great experience with it. And I think possibly the same thing, happened with Anything Goes this past year. It's like they kind of heard the title like before. They kind of maybe on a side note knew what Anything Goes was, but they didn't really know what the show was about. And again, the show did have a big rewrite in 2022. So it's a little different than sort of the classic Golden Age version. But, once we sort of got into that process of rehearsals, and they were like, oh yeah, this is a good choice for us. And we're really excited about this. So
That's great.
Yeah.
And I mean, how often do kids all get to lean in one direction and then
Right.
lean in
Right.
that's a huge, that's a totally different kind of a different kind of work for them, and a lot more. I mean, those group numbers, those big splashy numbers are not like what they've been doing in Footloose and Grease.
No.
It's different. You're using different sorts of muscles. So talking about turning the page, Allison, tell me about the musical that you're going to be doing in February next year.
I am so beyond excited. We are going to be doing Once Upon a One More Time, which is the jukebox musical that uses all Britney Spears songs. It is a huge shift for us from Anything Goes.
You think?
Yeah, just a tiny, tiny shift. But again, I always want to push my students in a different direction. This is a show that, I actually have never seen a live production of it before. And it's a show that is relatively new, so it hasn't been done a lot. I think that's another thing, in addition to trying to choose different styles, I also like to try to choose shows that maybe aren't as well known or aren't done as much. So definitely with Anything Goes, and then this show next year, Grease was kind of an anomaly. I chose that show specifically because of the senior cast that I knew that I had. It was the perfect show for them to do. And so, there's a lot of decisions that go into choosing a show, but specifically for next year, it was, really thinking about the cast that I'm going to have. We have incredible, female characters. The show has incredible female characters. Because I'm a choreographer first and foremost, I always want to choose a show that has a lot of choreography in it, because that is my happy place. And I just really enjoy doing shows that are sort of those big over the top choreographic, pieces. So this is a show, Britney Spears, what more can you say, right? We're going to be doing a lot of really fun stuff. So, so not only, when we choose a show, we're not only thinking about our cast, but we also have a really incredible student pit. And that goes back again to Elise Mullen, who is just a master at what she does with our students in the pit. We have such talented students. And so thinking about those students and giving them also a different challenge. So for Grease, she came up with the incredible idea of, when the audience is coming in at the beginning, when we open the house and at intermission, let's just play songs from the 1950s that, aren't even in the show. So, you've got this pit learning Johnny Be Good and all these really Lollipop and all these really incredible songs.
Put you right in the mood. It
Exactly.
puts you in that moment. Right.
Yes, exactly. Right. It brought you into the feeling of the show, and it was great. And then this past year, we knew that we had some really, really strong strings and winds players. And so, choosing Anything Goes was perfect for that, because we could really play to those, no pun intended, really play to those students' strengths in the pit.
Sure.
And so, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And so, again, choosing next year's show, we really thought about all of that. We wanted to give all of our students just something a little different, a little bit more contemporary.
And you're still giving your audience what they want, which is a dance show where all their kids can shine. And it's still, Allison, this is still a teaching experience. There's still pedagogy going on here. The kids are learning different techniques and things like that, but they're also learning group dynamics. They're learning time management. They're learning all those things. One of the things that Elise said was that as a musical theater choreographer and director, you get hyper excited about each new project every year and how you can, the two of you can bring it to the stage with your team. And you've done, I should think she said about 10 shows together. And
Yeah.
it never gets old. And she says, I love watching her rehearse because, and with her students and reminding them about their arms, legs, twirls, spins, etc., because she locks into every moment in the show and knows exactly what should be happening and when. Truly every step that every student makes. I mean, there's a lot of kids on that stage. That's got to be like, you're hurting more than cats.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like herding cats, but again, most of these students are PACE students, and so they're used to me in class, and used to the expectations that I have, and when we're rehearsing our pieces, we're breaking it down, we're running sections over and over again, we're filming and putting it on Google Classroom so they can go back and rehearse at home. I always have usually two incredible dance captains who I'll teach the material and they'll come in and help me clean, or they'll take smaller groups to the side, kids who might be struggling, and just clarifying that choreography with them, or sometimes they'll take them at lunchtime or whatever it might be. So it really is a team effort. But again, I do get really excited about it because it's I think for a lot of kids, they feel, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm never going to be able to dance that number at that speed with all of these people around me. And so there's a lot of self-doubt. Sure. And to see them then get up on stage and be successful with it, that's the best thing. That's the best thing about my job, is to see, a student who might doubt themselves get up there and just beam on stage. And that's really all I can ask for.
So really kind of wanted to dig into kind of the turning the page idea, and not to beat that metaphor, but it's valid. I think that the idea that in June, you're about to send your graduating seniors off. You've already named your musical, which is unusual. Most schools wait until October, November. So kids have already moved on from Anything Goes, obviously, but now they've got to focus for what they're going to be thinking of. They're probably listening. They've probably got Britney on their playlists already on Spotify. They probably, their poor parents are going to spend the summer with Britney Spears. Right. but that excitement, the excitement that you want them to have, has already, I would imagine, started for some of them. They're starting to listen and starting to get used to that. There's sadness. There's a talk about how you help them navigate these seniors who you've had for 4 years and probably earlier than that. Mm-hmm. Talk about helping them navigate that kind of moving on, and your other students about, there's got to be a lot of tears, I would imagine, in the next few weeks.
Yeah. It is a challenge every year. We have our PACE senior recital. It's usually the last thing that we do. So this year it's on June 18th. So we haven't had our seniors' final performance in PACE yet. But, I often say that night is kind of overwhelming for the seniors. They still have graduation to go. The kids who cry the most at senior recital are actually our juniors. And that's because they've created such bonds with that senior class over the course of the year. But what I try to remind them is, and again, this goes back to the setting high expectations and the creating community, is that our seniors, they're leaving, but they always have a place here. They can always come back. They come back on breaks and they ask, can I come to a musical rehearsal? I'm like, fine, we're doing a rough run through of Act 1, but you're more than happy to come and watch. It's going to be a mess, but feel free to come. And they're just happy to come and be in the space. And so it doesn't really matter to them. And on top of that, I really try as much as I can to keep in touch with my students once they've moved on. It's important for me to continue that that relationship with them, even when they're outside the four walls of this building, because we have spent so much time together, and we have, and I've seen them progress so much from freshman to senior year. I still have students that I keep in touch with from my first year teaching here at Mamaroneck in 2011. I have students who text me when they get engaged or when they find out they're pregnant, or I've been invited to weddings. That's important to me. I don't just, I spend all this time creating community with them. I hate to just, I can't just drop them when they when they leave this building. It's important to me to continue that conversation and to continue that relationship with them. We do have a lot of students who go on to continue doing, theater, dance, or music in college. And, I'm always loving to hear about that. But as far as our underclassmen are concerned, I really try to say at the very beginning of the year, really try to soak in as much as you can, learn everything you can from these seniors, because one day that's going to be you. You're going to be the senior, and you're going to be imparting your wisdom on, students who are younger than you are. And so it's important that you just try to absorb as much as you can. And then, with the seniors, saying, hey, this is your moment to be a true mentor to someone younger than you, and to really help guide them through this process. And so, I will always tell my seniors, first rehearsal, like, go sit next to a freshman. You may not know that person. Go sit next to them, ask them what their name is, ask them what their favorite color is, what their favorite food is. It doesn't matter to me, but start to build that relationship, because again, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And it's important to build those relationships across all grade levels, to keep those expectations that we set going.
Sure. I think, it's the idea of family, the idea of connection. You're spending so much time with each other. You're learning about each other. You're seeing what each other's strengths and weaknesses are. You're helping raise that bar for everybody. I think that's it is, to me, it's the ultimate team sport, because it lasts longer than most sports do. And the vulnerability of theater, I think, the fact that it needs to be that safe space, and it needs to do that, and it's all for one weekend. It's all of that is compressed into one weekend.
Yeah.
And the emotions around, production week, and then opening night, second show, closing night, and then strike, and it's like it's over in no time. And there's a beauty to that. There's also so much emotion behind that you as a director need to help them navigate as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's also, trying to not let that just disappear once the show is over. So we also are extremely fortunate here at Mamaroneck that we have an incredible video teacher and video program that they come and film our shows, and then they edit it into these really beautiful, they're gorgeous. They're professional level quality productions. And so, the video teacher will come and with her students and film, and then, hand me this beautifully edited video. And, end of April, I think we all got back together to watch Anything Goes, to our version of Anything Goes together. And it was amazing. Everyone, they were so excited. They brought snacks, they all huddled together. It just was such a joyous, let's come back to this, and have another wonderful moment and experience together. So, we try to keep it going. And then of course with the Pedro's open mic, we like to perform in that to sort of keep that going and invite all of our students to come to that. The Metro Awards, we always get together every year and have a, nominations watch party. And, so it's trying to keep that going, even though, our show was done the first weekend of February. And it does help. Again, it does help that most of these kids are PACE kids and see each other a lot every day anyway.
Sure.
But it is important to keep that going so that it's not just, okay, the show's over, we're done, moving on. Even though we are moving on to next year's show, we still want to keep in the moment, because we have, like you said, we have spent so many hours on it, so much time on it. It's important to honor that, and it's important to recognize that. And for the better part of a year, these kids have been engrossed in the world of Anything Goes. And so, it's important to keep that going, I think.
Yeah, this might be the only time this has ever these two names have ever been put together. But to go from Cole Porter to Britney Spears, I think it's just a natural. I
Yeah, of
think
course.
talk about anything goes. My goodness.
Yes.
So, do you have any practical tips, Allison? Any kind of thoughts for teachers, for students, for parents about navigating this annual rite of turning the page from musical to musical, from graduating seniors to rising seniors, to anything that you've learned over the years, whether in your personal experience that or as a teacher at Mamaroneck, that kind of would help?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's inevitable, right? Time is going to pass, things are going to change, we're going to move on. And, like I said before, I think it's important to, as we build these connections in our theater programs, is to not let them just disappear when you are a senior who's graduated. A lot of seniors, I think, or a lot of students, alumni who have graduated from high school feel weird coming back, to their high school after a year or whatever. They're like, oh, that's weird. Like, I don't want to go back to my high school. But that doesn't really happen in the theater department, right? It's the kids want to come back. They want to see their teachers. They want to come back and see the productions. And so I think it's allowing yourself as a student, as an alum, to maintain those connections with your theater department. We want to see you come back. We want to see you come back to the shows. We want to, see how you're doing after spending so much time with you, excuse me, over 4 years. And then, as far as the students are in the transition, from, freshman, sophomore, junior up to senior, like I said, just taking everything in. I think sometimes, we can just live in our own little world sometimes, in our little box, and not look outside and see what's going on outside of us. But, I think to just, especially at rehearsals, put the phones away. If you're not being used in a particular scene or at that particular moment in your choreography, put your phone away and go talk to someone else who's sitting there, also not being used at that moment, and, make that connection and just talk to people. And that's really, I think, what makes our programs what they are those connections. And so, just allowing yourself to be completely open to every experience. My students, again, like I said at the beginning, I've been asked multiple times, can we do Mean Girls? Can we do Heathers? And I think every year they're a little disappointed when I'm like, no, we're not doing those shows. And then they ask why. And I tell them, well, because I think we can challenge you a little bit more. Not that those shows aren't valid, but let's look at something different, and open up your horizons to something that's a little bit different than that. And I think in the end, they're very appreciative of that way of looking at things. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just, just allowing yourself to be in the moment all the time. Because again, that's what we're trying to do here in theater, right? We're trying to change lives. We're trying to build community, and you can't do that if you're very set in your ways. And so, trusting those around you, and trusting, for students, trusting your creative team to be making a decision that is right for that particular group of students as far as choosing a musical. And just allowing yourself to sort of be there and experience it, and open up your horizons a little bit, I think is really important.
That's a great point. And I think the other beauty of this is Mamaroneck kids travel, they see other shows. I see Mamaroneck kids at a bunch of other shows. They're in youth theaters, which will do Heathers, and it will do Mean Girls, and they can have that outside thing, so that the high school musical is a teaching moment, is an elevated experience for everybody, and you get the idea that it's a continuum, that it's different. It's not a youth theater. This is great stuff. I think it's really helpful to kind of pause at the end of the year and think about this, and kind of know what people are going through. And So when are auditions? Because I need to work on my midriff, because I'm going to bear my midriff for the audition. I just need to work on my
September 28th and 29th.
September 28th. So you got to give them a couple of weeks to get back into school.
Yeah.
September 28th and 29th. And the show is in February.
Yes, first weekend of February, 4th, 5th, and 6th next year.
First one out of the box. Well, yeah. I will see you before then, Allison. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today on Lights Up, the High School Theater Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
That's better.